So thank you everybody for being here today. Rina and I are really excited to start this session. This is a three-part series on narrative. So for those of you that are new to WEAll, WEAll is a global organization working towards systems change. And a part of our theory of change is to really develop a core narrative that kind of explains some of the core thinking around a well-being economy. And these are the digestible bits that help explain to a diverse audience of what it is that we're trying to do. So this first session of the three-part series is intended to look at how narratives have worked to transform systems in the past. And Rina from the European Forestry Institute is going to be hosting this session. If you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat. The format of the session will be fairly presentation-like in the beginning, and then we'll move into a more interactive session toward the end. This is planned for a 90-minute call. And yeah, thank you again for being here. So I'm going to share my screen, and then Rina, I will pass it over to you to begin.
Great. Thank you. Oops, let me see. Yeah.
Can you see my screen okay?
Yeah, I can see it.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you, Isabel. And yeah, hi everyone. It's really great to be here and also to join this great cohort of people who are interested in exploring narrative formations and storytelling to drive the change towards the well-being economy. A little bit of myself, if that's okay to share. My name is Rina, and I work for the European Forest Institute, which is an international research organization with a headquarters in Finland. And I'm running a number of projects that connect science and media through the topics of climate change and forests. And at the moment, we are working on a digital media analysis project, which also has a little bit of component of public engagement on the Amazon rainforest fires, and it's called Out of the Flames. And by taking a little bit of unusual approach here to explore narratives based on the research analysis, I hope to share some of the learnings around the narrative formations and the digital space, and discuss further with you what role narratives play and what role we play in facilitating change, whatever the change is. So the next slide, please. So yeah, before we go into the, do the deep dive into the topic that we're going to be focusing on today, I wanted to get to know a little bit about your expectations, why you're interested in narratives to begin with. What are you hoping to get out of this session, so that I can try to reflect that in my session. And yeah, if you're free, if you feel comfortable speaking on microphone through the video, that'd be really great if you can share. Otherwise, if you're feeling a little bit shy or it's at the end of the day, so maybe if you want to, type that in, that'd be really good if you can share that over the chat. But who would like to go first? Maybe Isabel, people in the call, so that maybe you can appoint some people who are maybe not,
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm very excited about this call because one of the core tenets of WEAll's work is to try and transform narrative, and it's new, it's hard. So this has been sort of an experimental process, and Rina has showed me some of her work. So I'm really eager to learn a little bit there. Jackie, I'm going to call on you because I know you. So do you want to share sort of what you're interested in? And then we can sort of popcorn if anyone wants to share. Just go ahead and open up your mic.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. I'm echoing you a bit, Isabel. I know a little bit about Rina's work, and I got some sense of how different narratives were forming across different communities, and it felt like there's such a diverse range of these narratives, and they were influencing many different aspects of communities and story. And with all that's happening with, news, fake news, polarization across the world and how detrimental that is, I think narrative currently is so powerful. So I'm really fascinated to learn more. And I have a lens of adult development, which we'll go into in another session. So I'm super interested to see how these worlds connect and meet.
I'll go ahead and jump in terms of some people who are new to WEAll, and then hopefully that'll get the ball rolling a little bit. And definitely feel free to jump in on the chat if you don't want to be vocal like I am right now. My name is Margaret Valerio. I'm an intern with a group called Hot or Cool that is a new organization that's trying to focus on particularly sustainability and sustainable lifestyle behavior changes. And because we're brand new and very fresh, then we're developing our global strategy and how we're working on our communications. And there's been a lot of interest in our group about narratives as a way of communicating and really tapping into what connects with people, that it's not always just the statistics and telling people this is what you should do. It's also about trying to help people understand in a very visceral way what it would feel like to switch to a more sustainable lifestyle. And so we're definitely very interested in that, but still getting our feet on the ground and interested in what you have to say.
Great, thank you so much.
We also have comments on the chat. And yeah, we have John who's sharing a comment here. So in an open space, we can go live. So yeah, we have an enormous challenge to change the narrative here in, how do you pronounce it?
Guernsey.
Guernsey.
Yeah.
Where is that actually? I'm sorry, I'm very...
It's off the coast of the UK, I believe. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Yeah, we have just elected a populist right-wing government that is going to go for growth, a version of Trump 4 years later. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, lots of challenges here. And I hope that I can also reflect that a little bit in terms of the political discourse that we have seen over the Amazon fire case. Yeah, difficulty in explaining concepts of well-being economy to people. That's another one from Andres. Okay, and yeah, Claudia's interest in narratives and the impressive power. So yeah, let's definitely dive into this at the end of the session, or maybe even in between the session. I think it's really important that we have this as a platform that we can actually share the knowledge that we have and experience. So let's make sure to secure enough time to do that. And yeah, if you want to share more, maybe if you can type it in over the chat, that'd be really amazing. All right, so we can maybe explore a little bit about narrative formation through our Amazon rainforest fires analysis and discuss what they tell us a little bit about the narratives in the digital environment. Okay, so yeah, a little bit of a quick intro on the project and the approach we've taken for this Out of the Flames. We are trying to reconstruct and mirror what is happening on the social media as a way to understand sociality and culture that emerges online. To do that, we have conducted a series of digital methods analysis, which is in the inductive research method from digital humanities of social sciences. We are working with the Public Data Lab, a network of interdisciplinary researchers, including those coming from King's College London and Design Institute called Density Design in Milan. And in terms of the data collection, since we have primarily looked into Twitter analysis on one hand and cross-platform image analysis on the other, we collected the Twitter data real time using 6 key hashtags that that emerged around the time of the Amazon fires last year, and other platforms' image data coming from Google, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram for our cross-platform image analysis. So the next slide, if you can change to the next slide, yeah. So I think it's really important that we put the issue into context, because I know that the Amazon fire may be popped up on your newsfeed, but it maybe is not something that you're familiar with. So I'd like to quickly go through what happened around that time when the Amazon fire became a global issue last year. And to reconstruct the event, we've actually carried out a series of interviews. I think altogether it was like 20 interviews with journalists and other experts who were closely following the event last year. And it was really interesting that usually when this kind of event takes place, a lot of people remember different things, but there was a little bit of a shared memory here in terms of the key events related to the Amazon fire. And one of that is the Day of Fire. It's called Dia do Fogo. If you speak Portuguese, sorry, my pronunciation not that great. But that happened on 10th to 11th August in 2019, when the local farmers supposedly organized illegal land clearing by cutting down the trees and putting the land on fire to get more agricultural land and actually get more attention. And as you may know, one of the deforestation drivers in the Amazon is cattle farming and soybean farming. And these crops are actually lucrative commodities, and they're exported to the places like US, Europe, and many Asian countries. So that was one of the key events that took place about 10 days before the event actually caught the national and international attention. But according to many of our interviewees, the real start of the event was actually when the smoke from the Amazon burning reached Sao Paulo on 19th August in 2019. And that's when a lot of tweets, Facebook posts, and other social media updates started to emerge. And national and international media also started to report about it. And if you go to the next slide, yeah, this triggered the celebrities that you see on the screen, like Cristiano Ronaldo and Leonardo DiCaprio, to react on their social media accounts using hashtags like Pray for Amazonia. And yeah, those two posts actually you see on the screen are from those celebrities. And yeah, what's interesting about this is that both of them used photos that are coming from the past events in completely different locations. So for instance, the one you see on the left side from Ronaldo was taken in the southern part of Brazil, not in the Amazon, back in 2013. Another interesting thing was the claim of Amazon as a lungs of the earth, and also Amazon to be producing 20% of oxygen in the world started to emerge. So the latter was heavily contested actually by a group of scientists in both social media and traditional media. So a lot of coverage actually came around it, sort of debunk news articles. And yeah, so I mentioned celebrities, but it was actually not the celebrities only, but also politicians started to actually react as well. And ahead of the G7 meeting, which was actually taking place during the week of 27th, Macron tweeted with a lungs claim, and as well as 20% of the world oxygen produced, and also a photo of burning forests that was taken by a photographer who died in 2003. That tweet actually got even the support from Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister, but Bolsonaro also reacted. The Brazilian president, also responded back negatively on Twitter. And there was also a personal attack, which was really like insane. But when Bolsonaro supposedly mocked Macron's wife on a Facebook post, and Macron to even react back during the G7 press meeting. So there was a lot of back and forth between those two politicians, online and offline, and there was a lot of media coverage around that time as well. A series of reactions by the politicians and the celebrities also triggered even more famous people and influencers to tweet using Amazon-related hashtags. So this one on the left is from Ellen DeGeneres, who supported the DiCaprio-backed organization, which was pledging $5 billion aid. And the one on the right is a tweet from a French Twitter influencer who mocked Bolsonaro in a video saying, "Wake up, Bolsonaro," and added a hashtag, which basically says in French, "Bolsonaro in sweat," along with "Pray for Amazonia" hashtag. Since this tweet from the French influencer came about the time when the G8-7 meeting took place, it is most likely to be related to the growing tension between the Bolsonaro and Macron. If you can stay on this screen, that'll be really good. So I mentioned several times this terminology of hashtag, but maybe in case like for those people who are not familiar with what it is, or the concept of tagging, it's probably best to think in the context of bookstore, where then books are categorized under different specific themes like politics, travel, and so on. So hashtag is a digital version of that categorization. But what's unique about the hashtag is that anyone can actually come up with it however they want, and actually anytime, anywhere. So during the Amazon fires last year, the hashtags like Pray for Amazon, Pray for Amazonia, and Save the Amazon started to emerge out of nowhere. And so did the other seemingly unrelated hashtags started to be used together with those hashtags. So that's what we are actually looking at here to understand the engagement, the emergent culture online. So all of this sounds like interesting, maybe like, show some interesting insights, but you are probably asking how they're actually linked to the narratives, right? There are a lot of research that has been conducted, which attempted to interpret the hashtag culture online. For instance, Papacherasi, she pointed out that the hashtag forms soft structures of storytelling, which enable collaborative narratives. Dawson, the research that came out actually this year, further claimed that it is a new narrative phenomenon or emergent storytelling where unusual issues emerge abruptly in the systems of the social media platforms. Zapovinia further claimed that social media discourse is a form of searchable talk, and hashtag functions as metadata and meta discourse where different interpersonal meanings are addressed in tweets. The last interpretation is actually really interesting. If you go back to the slides before. Yeah, so the last interpretation, I really like that. And it's also very interesting in a sense that the hashtag almost acts as a magnet for different narratives to come together and new ones to actually emerge. In other words, seemingly unrelated issues get associated with the hashtags because those issues are personally important to someone somewhere. It also implies that different interests, concerns, and motives are at play in conveying or promoting those specific messages. So with that research framework in our back of our head, I think it's really good to look at the digital media analysis, and in particular the top hashtag over the 10-day period to see what sort of different issues actually emerged around that time. So as I said, hashtag is also a way to discover different concerns, different interests that actually popped up, and then that's actually sort of translated into the hashtag formation. And on the screen, you see the most popular hashtags that was used between 24th August to 2nd September 2019. And when looking at this, what do you notice here? Are there anything that you notice on the screen? So just to kind of describe a little bit, the number of tweets actually included. So the number of tweets which use those hashtags reflected in the volume, so the size of the stream. And if you kind of see this like at the first instance, I think it's mostly the main thing that you notice is that there are different ways of articulating the Amazon fires issues on Twitter. So like such as Pray for Amazonia, there's a pray, the terminology pray is used, save is used, and also that the climate change issues and so on, if you can see it at the bottom. But what is really interesting is that there is a substantive drop-off in the public attention over the course of 10-day period. And this really explains that there is a rhythm and temporality of online engagement around the hashtags. So even though it's trending and it's like spiking up, there is always end of life. And that's really something that you can easily visibly see here. Yeah, and another thing that's, as I mentioned, there was G7 meeting happening at the same time. And if you click through, Isabel, you see that the G7 actually is translated into the hashtag. So it started to pop out basically around the time when the Macron-Bolsonaro sort of like head-to-head fight was happening. And then also the French influencer tweets that I mentioned before also popped up as well. And that also caught quite a lot of attention by basically getting the tweets using that hashtag. So that's kind of the sort of the culture that we identify by looking at the 10-day period top hashtag. Sorry. So yeah, I want to also talk a little bit about the hashtag relations. So we talked a little bit about the hashtag culture here, that a lot of people started to use different hashtags together and then include that into the tweet. And basically that's how it represents different kind of issues that emerge in the time of the breaking news, like in a situation like this that happened in the Amazon fire. And I kind of want to do a little bit of sort of the code interpretation with you, if that's a possibility. And maybe what I can do is to also share the link with you over here on the chat. So you can also look at this on your own. But let me share the screen. Oh, I think maybe it is not possible to share the screen. Isabel, would you be able to? Yeah. Awesome. So, so this visualization is basically showing the association, so how the different hashtags are actually connected with one another. So as you see on the screen,
you should be able to. Have you tried? Do you want to try?
Okay. Right. So
there you go.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, so when you look at this visualization, which basically, as I said in the beginning, there was 6 different hashtags that we used as an entry point. Okay, this is kind of difficult to, all right, as an entry point. And then, of course, everyone's using different hashtags together with those main 6 hashtags that we use as a data collection method. And as you see on the screen, there are a lot of different keywords that pop up as hashtag. And I kind of want you to take a look at this and then see if there's anything surprising here. So for example, here, what do you see? So I see like around the, oh, sorry. So for example, you see Trump tariffs, defund deforestation. I guess this is Congress, farmers. There's so many different topics that emerges here, fact checking. And the closer to each other they are there are more associations. So there are more linkages between the hashtags. So the likelihood of them used together in the tweet is higher. This is really a nice way to actually see what sort of different issues that emerged. And one of the things that I found really interesting in this cluster, for example, is that a lot of time, so, the Amazon fires was about fires, but there's a lot of deeper issues actually start to surface, like animal rights that you see over here, veganism, food, vegetarian, leather, all of them are actually connected to the deforestation drivers, as well as also the political sort of the debates, like, well, I guess like, the COP24, the country name China is included here, Donald Trump. Also the pollution, so many different things actually popped up here. So this actually kind of indicates that there are so many issueification. We call this as the terminology in the digital methods. It's called issueification. And even though the Amazon fires was an entry point for us, we actually discovered there's so many different issues that have been addressed. And each and every single notes that you see on the screen actually have tweets behind it. And I want to kind of share that a little bit with you. And let me see if you can take over. Would you be able to take over, Isabel?
So you'll want to stop sharing your screen and I'll pull up your presentation again.
Okay, let me see. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let me do that.
Yeah.
And let me just put it.
Sorry, yeah, we are struggling a little bit with the tech thing.
I just did from beginning, which is not
okay.
what we want.
So it's slide 16.
What number is this? Okay.
So so I wanted to share a little bit with you the what's actually behind those hashtags. So the issues that we discovered through the hashtags are pretty clear in terms. I mean, it's really variety of different issues actually emerged, even though we were talking about the Amazon, our entry point for the research was Amazon fires. And when we look at the what's behind those hashtags, you start seeing different narratives. So for example, under the hashtag, behind the hashtag beef, there was a tweet that points out the link between Amazonia and animal product consumptions. There was another one that calls for attention to check where your meat products are coming from. So yeah, even though it's the hashtag beef is like we can guess a little bit of like what's actually behind those. There are a lot of different kind of narratives that started to emerge here. Same for Trump, the hashtag Trump. So when you look at the hashtag Trump, there is a tweet which mentions a link between the fires and corporate responsibility. There's another one that talks about the Trump's trade talk with China. And to add a few more, I think we also saw the COP24. And then you see a tweet that expressed positive reaction towards a G7 meeting where $20 million aid was agreed. Another one talks about the human responsibility of fires and call for Bolsonaro to accept international aid. There was also hashtag the Leonardo DiCaprio. And behind those notes, you actually, so that was the, this one was about the, sharing picture doesn't really, help. So we should actually take the tangible action. So those kind of notes that you saw on the screen, every single one of them have the different type of narratives, and it's actually thousands of them referring to uncountable issues that are associated with the Amazon fires. So we looked at the hashtag culture a little bit, and it would be when we look at and if you remember correctly in the beginning, the number of hashtag usage declined quickly, and if you look at the top retweets, so retweets is kind of like in a way endorsement, promoting what you tweet, what your message get tweeted and just get promoted by doing the retweets. If you look at this visualization, you also see that the different kind of narratives start, and it's all color coded, and every single one, every different color represent different things. But for example, if you look at the light blue, that's a pray for Amazonia type of tweet. So it's more talking about the sort of like, wishing that something will happen. And then slowly, gradually, it actually changed to call for action. So for example, the calling for financial donations, planting trees, or go vegan type of sort of call for actions. And what's also interesting is that the looking at the number of retweets. So if you look at the first 5 days, you see quite a few, quite big volume of retweets actually took place per tweet. But then after, 29th August, it basically had a huge drop, just like the hashtags that had a sort of a short time span of the attention. Another thing is that it was the hashtag that we used for the data collection was English language hashtags, but there are a lot of different sort of the language versions start to pop up. So you see Italian, Korean, French, Tamil, Thai, Japanese, and so on. But I think it would be really good to look at sort of individual narrative, I think, as a way for you to get to know what has been actually addressed through the Amazon fire. So if you click 2 times, so yeah, in terms of the volume of retweets, the one in the yellow square was the most retweeted. So the one you see, that's a Thai tweet that was retweeted 14,000 times on 26 August, followed by the blue one that was nearly 9,000. Yeah, and then what's actually intriguing here is that most retweeted tweet over the 10-day period did actually not talk about the Amazon fires at all, but instead raised awareness around deforestation in Thailand. So we could say that narrative transformed and went beyond the main topic of the Amazon fires for a specific community of people, and addressed completely unrelated forest issues in the other parts of the world. When you look at the second most retweeted tweet, if you go back the one before, yeah, so over this 10-day period, the tweet not only included a photo of rescued tiger, but it also referred to other, which added another sort of religious framing and perspectives. Another thing that you also notice a lot in this kind of research is that emojis are actually used a lot in the way to express sadness or distress or any kind of emotions. So several other most retweeted tweets used video photos from the past unrelated events that is not taking place in Amazon at all. And for instance, there was one tweet that received thousands of retweets in the first half of the period, highlighted in blue, while another one that received relatively smaller retweets that is highlighted in green. So let's look at those in detail. The tweet highlighted in purple was coming from Sunrise Movement, which maybe you are familiar with them. It's a global movement against climate change organized by students. In that tweet, you can find a video of Pataso indigenous women claiming that their land has been burned down. It received more than 146,000 retweets and over 164,000 likes. So it got huge amount of attention and a huge amount of engagement. We are still investing in the context of this video, but what's clear is that the lady in the video was one of the leaders of the Pataso community in the state of Minas Gerais. And they are not located in Amazonia, but closer to Sao Paulo. The community, however, suffered the dam collapse in early 2019, which killed more than 250 people, which was actually even bigger sort of incident for them that basically pushed them away from the area to move away from, for their safety. So given that this is not even related to Amazon fires per se, the question here is, to which extent can we actually, and should we use these unrelated videos and visuals to raise awareness of the specific incident of our concern, maybe not theirs? Is it ethical? Is it the way, only way to capture more attention online? So this is something that I want to plant it as a sort of the question that maybe we want to reflect later on. Another tweet that you see on the right side, it's actually completely different, but it's related to whataboutism. And the green highlight tweet, yeah, so that one brought up the Notre Dame burning as a way to call for more attention, the media's attention on Amazon fires. So yeah, this is just another example of framing that came into the picture when looking at the most retweeted tweets in the 10-day period. Okay, so you have done, Isabel, you have done this workshop around memes in the past, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's really interesting the role image plays in this kind of, you know, in terms of forming narratives in the digital environment. And what we didn't know is if there are any sort of differences in the way images get shared through different platforms. Like when we talk about platforms, yeah, here it's Facebook, Google, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. So to understand what issues actually surface and emerge in different platforms, we've compared top images per platform, so most shared images per platform during the 10-day period. So you see on the screen different sort of images, it's called stack, of the top 10 images per platform. And the more you see, the more it was shared. I wonder if you can see the differences here. What do you see here in terms of are there any specific difference that you can recognize? Well, so maybe I can just go ahead and tell you. So if you go to the next one. So this is a grid version and the top images per platform. Yeah, you see the main thing that you see is pretty much the fire images. But what I find it really interesting here is that those iconic images of fires, especially the one that proved to come from the past unrelated events, have constantly showed up on Instagram and Facebook. And it's actually, those are the two platforms that you actually see those images. Yeah, so these are the images. If you remember correctly, in the beginning, I showed you the tweets coming from Ronaldo, DiCaprio, Macron, and those are actually the exact images that circulated on Facebook and Instagram as the sort of the most engaged photos on those platforms. So when looking at the variation of that image that was included in the tweet by Macron, so that's the fire image that was taken, the photo that was taken by the photographer who died in 2003. We've identified 3 different categories of the type of images in the data set. So that's this one is Twitter data sets, but first type is clustered as A. So that's the copy of the image almost without any kind of modification. And that was actually the most shared image file related to the Macron photo. The second type shown as B was a screenshot or modified images. So yeah, you see on the right side. And then the third type indicated C is a memeified images, which were much smaller in volume compared to the other 2. And here's the tweet text that went along with those images. And what is interesting here is that despite there is a misleading image, right? That, you know, a lot of media talked about it. You know, there was a lot of debunking going on, but none of these tweets actually reported it as fake or misleading, but rather they were mobilized to promote more attention to the issues around fires. And you see a lot of emojis and the hashtags that's calling for like pray for, you know, the pray, save, you know, the hope and so on. If you're familiar with the digital platforms and then sort of the action they took for several years since the concept of fake news started to emerge, different digital platforms also started to take measurements to limit the spread of misinformation. And Facebook, for instance, hired a number of independent fact-checking organizations to conduct independent verification of reported contents on their platform. So each country has their sort of like independent fact-checkers who are constantly looking at the contents during the breaking news situation, and they're actually marking them as a reported content. During the analysis, we have found out that this photo that was tagged as false on the one post did not appear to be treated as a false on the other post. So the one you see on the right side, the one coming from Macron, didn't disappear from the platform, but the other exactly same image have has been marked as the reported contents. So what does this tell us is that the platforms have the power to influence the way we access and obtain information. So we need to look beyond the narrative formations. I know this is kind of beyond what we are covering here, but it's really important that we have to think about the power of the digital platform and its algorithmic biases and manipulation. If you were to develop and spread strategies for narratives online. So I went through quickly. I went through different sort of analysis results here. I wanted to kind of get to know what your thoughts are. Maybe, there's something that, maybe even just a question, but also the reflections of like how the digital culture is sort of potentially limiting, but also there are, different kind of emergent culture that's evolving in the digital platforms. Are there anything that if you want to share, that'd be really great to hear that from you. And I think there is maybe a question from Catherine.
No, she was just saying that was an observation from what you had showed before on the
okay.
that maybe those images were Twitter focused.
Right.
Wait, can you ask your question, sorry, one more time, and then we'll open it up.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, are there any sort of like, because I think there's a lot of things here. Are there any thoughts, reflections, any new ideas that emerge that you would like to maybe share in the call? Or do you feel like, okay, so now we have, like this kind of realities. Yeah, how do we go about it is the next step. But it'd be really good to kind of get to know what you thought about the analysis results. Or if there's anything that was unclear, because I know it's like, yeah, maybe I went through a little bit too quick. It'd be really good if I can also, make sure to answer any of the questions for this part.
I have a question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So I was just curious, this was all very fascinating, by the way, and I thought very well explained. I was wondering, given the that sort of half-life of how long it takes before the topic is just kind of out of the trending cycle, and given that there is so much not like misleading information, that even when it's being used positively to mobilize people, it's not always the correct information. Do you have any tips or suggestions in terms of how organizations that are trying to move the discourse in a positive direction can kind of manage the narrative a little bit, so that obviously people will eventually kind of take it into their own hands, and after a certain point you won't be able to control the narrative? So do you have any tips in terms of how to manage that?
Yeah, it is really a difficult question, isn't it? And I think it depends on the organization you're working for. I think if you're very focused on the ethics and using the event, the photos and videos from the past event, it's a really ethical. That's kind of like where I feel that, especially I'm working in a research science organization. And even though it would be a sort of a weapon for us to actually get in at the time, and then, maybe promote with this kind of like shocking images and so on, is it really, really something that we should be moving into? So that's kind of the question we always ask. And I think answer from the science research, organization is like, no, we don't do that. But if you look at the Sunrise Movement one, if you remember the Indigenous woman, the video that really like got promoted massively all across the Twitter. Yeah, there is also a power there, right? There's also a way that you can actually mobilize more debate, more conversation, and more attention, or maybe not related to the Amazon per se, but the sort of the forest related issues. And that also is a positive side. So in a nutshell, I think as an organization, you have to probably look into the what kind of ethics that you have in place. But at the same time, another thing that I didn't mention, when you look at the top retweets, if you look at the most retweeted at the end of the cycle, so when the spikes kind of cease out, there's a lot of NGOs who articulate it, or who mobilize the hashtags as a way to also promote their report. There's like one on the Blackstone, which is like one of the big shareholder of the who investing in the deforestation driver company in a way. So if you have that kind of instrument, if you have any kind of sort of like reports that you can actually share as a way to add to the conversation, that's another thing that you could potentially do. So yeah, it's really tough. I really find it really tough. On one hand, yeah, you can use this as a way to spread the message, but ethics really comes in.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Rina, I'm going to read you just a couple comments.
Yeah.
So one comment is the owners of these platforms have, like, just highlighting the point that the owners of these platforms have a lot of control and they're able to greatly manipulate public opinion. The other one is this saying, I'm reflecting on the speed and ease of which people can reshare information. It makes it easier to share inaccurate information. When a topic is emotional, you want to take immediate action and not pausing to read a longer analysis to get the information from another source. And then a question of, do you have any thoughts on strengths and limitations of social media analysis? It's pretty clear that only most posts and engagement come from a small portion of users, and that what gets most engagements is more of a function of what the algorithms promote and incentivize rather than necessarily direct measure of public opinion. I know those are three kind of heavy questions, but any thoughts on those?
Yeah, no, that's a really good one, and I feel that that's kind of the limitation of these methods, in a way that we are starting with 6 different hashtags as a way to capture the data. And hashtags are really difficult to, basically, because it's emergent, right? Like it emerges as the event get unfolded. So there are definitely limitations there, but it also creates some sort of give us some insights of the different kind of
we
culture.
want to see.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so yeah, there are different kind of culture that emerge, even if it's a small, well, it is small in the sense that we are looking at the 6 hashtags as a starting point. We're also looking at a 10-day period. So that's kind of the limitation, but it also gives a little bit of idea of the sort of the life cycle and what kind of actors are there in that time period, as a way to also draw up some, not as a sort of like solid conclusion, but give us an idea of how we can actually, maybe try out and then experiment a little bit based on the findings that we have. So definitely, just like any research, any kind of like research studies that are out there, there are always limitations. But it did give us a little bit different insights as to compared to, for example, the traditional sort of public engagement study, which you do like a survey and so on, which also gives a different kind of insights, but pretty limited. I hope that answered your question.
Do you have any thoughts about any learnings that you found around like inaccurate versus accurate measurements, or maybe any advice for people like myself who manages WEAll social media? How do you, from what you've learned, attract the audiences that you're looking for, and are ensuring that your information is shared the way that you are intending it to be shared? And I'm not sure, if there's, at what point does it sort of spin off to where you don't have control, where the image is shared and it's not even an image of the Amazon? Yeah, I don't know if you have on that.
Yeah, that's a tough question. But I think if every single person who's using social media and then sharing whatever information that comes through is responsible, right? If you just do the retweet without checking the background of like what is actually being written or being said in the video, we actually have the responsibility in spreading that information. So that's kind of coming down to the, yeah, what is your ethos? I mean, what do you believe in? And I think that's kind of something maybe Jackie might also talk about in her session. But it's really important that we actually acknowledge the power we have, in terms of spreading information. And that's one of the reasons why, in the sort of the media literacy issues started to come up also in the education field. Because at the end of the day, yeah, if we are prepared to take whatever action that we want to take, then the information space becomes a little bit better instead of just like sort of like, acting that, immediately whenever you see things. So yeah, that's really coming down to what you believe in.
Okay, cool. Do you want me to reshare my screen again?
Yeah, that'll be really good.
Okay, great.
So yeah, so we kind of talked about this research part of things. And I know that, it has a lot of different components. We are still sort of in the process of it. So, we don't also have the solid conclusion. But what this whole thing told us in a way, yeah, it's this one, is that the classic sort of narrative formation, like this hero's journey map that maybe you have come across with or heard of before, may no longer be so effective, because there is no single narrative that fits all due to the nature of digital platforms, which really dramatically changed the way we communicate and share and engage with each other, right? So that's why I guess TV, or like, I don't know, like it depends on the generation, but maybe you used to listen to CD or, read newspapers. Those actually became obsolete, and more user-centric services like Spotify and YouTube and Netflix started to dominate our lives. So yeah, I feel that, there is one important thing a lot of people in the, like me, who's actually working as a communicator or a journalist or storyteller, tend to forget. In the changing society we are living today, it's really no longer about developing the most beautiful told story or narrative like that you saw in the hero's journey map. What really matters is that, like, what change we want and how we mobilize the power of storytelling and narratives to facilitate that change. That's really, really coming down to that. And yeah, before we, think about the development of narratives and formulate different kind of narratives, it's really important for us to step back from the immediate change we want. But instead focus on imagining the ultimate dream scenario of the future. And that's where the well-being economy really comes in. If you click through like 3 times, I think. So this is a really simple, but I think it's a really useful method by Changeist that help us imagine the future we want and identify the steps that we need to take in order to make that happen. And our role as a communicator or storyteller or connector is to identify the narratives that act as the magnets to bring those people together and make a movement together. Yeah, so I'm not sure how many people in this room actually have done some system thinking exercises, but you might have come across with this kind of Iceberg model, maybe cluster mapping. The Iceberg model helps us not just looking at the issue on the surface level, but dig deeper to find out what is underneath the issue and identify where you should intervene to fix the problem. And this is a very nice tool to identify which type of change is needed. And I just wanted to bring this up because we talked about the, sort of the flipping the script and then really looking into the change that we want to make and then what kind of steps we want to take. And yeah, it's a really nice tool to identify sort of, the change we want to have in order to fix the cause of the issue and not the symptoms. So just to kind of quickly go through the systems approach to the storytelling. Everyone's familiar with the sea marbles being affected by plastic bags, plastic straws, and so on, right, as you see on the screen. So if we were to focus on that event, that's the sort of the event that we see on the surface. When looking at the below that, so the patterns, there's so many other issues that surround that main event. We see that there are a lot of plastic garbage ending up on the seabed. We also have an issue of microplastics floating around the ocean. And when looking at the structural level, our current economy is set up in the way that seeks the cheapest solution to produce goods, and prices of the products does not bear in mind those negative externalities such as waste and pollution. So we export those plastic waste to another country where waste management mechanism doesn't really exist. And that's how all the plastic waste end up in the ocean. So to stop the issue, a number of initiatives like plastic clearing or cleaning in the ocean started to emerge, which are very important actions because we have all those plastics floating around and we have to solve that. But it is actually a band-aid on the symptom, and we are not actually fixing the real cause of the issue. So when looking at where the problem is coming from, it's actually our preference for convenience to buy products that are packed in plastic. So mental models, as you see, if that changes, everything above that changes as well. And this is a really nice model to kind of do the exercise with your colleagues if you're looking into the specific event or issues. But when you're doing this iceberg model exercise, what we discover is that despite many intervention points are at the structural level, like that's where the policy, the solution comes in, our moral models are there underneath, right? So all the issues that above that, that's holding up the entire system. And that is the one causing the issue to begin with. So that's why it's good to keep reminding ourselves that after all, everything, so it's not just only plastic thing that I just talked about, but everything, including our political, economic, social structures, are designed and developed by human being. And in other words, in order to change that structure, we need to change people and their mindset, their moral models. So that's where the importance of connecting with people at emotional level comes in. And that's the way, the narratives actually play a huge role here. If you go to the next one. Yeah. So I really love this categorization coming from Ella Sermarchet. It is sort of the framework that's used as a nice categorization of stories in the systems change context. And according to her, there are 3 different distinct roles that the stories play in facilitating the systems change. So firstly, story can act as a light, putting the spotlight on not only the problems, but also underrepresented voices. It makes the invisible visible. It also helps build a constructive reasoning on the change we need. It can also shed the light on how the future could look like. And the second one is the story as a glue. And story can be used as to build the communities and create movements. Some of the stuff that you see, like Greta Thunberg is a really good example of that. It can act as a way to connect people who speak the shared language and create a common understanding. And those are the people that you work with, you're collaborating with. They can actually also work together with you to lead the change. So story as glue. And finally, story can also act as a web that is constructed with a diverse set of narratives based on the common themes. It recognizes the depth and layers of different perspectives and opinions, and also the languages, really. So let me share some of the real life examples to illustrate how we can interpret different movements. So story as a light, I think that's a kind of the most imaginable one. But local people like indigenous communities are experiencing the impacts of climate change at first hand. And putting a spotlight on their voices can bring reality much closer to us. this is a short documentary film that came out, and that from the Canadian I think documentary filmmakers, and yeah, they present the experience and voices of Indigenous women as is in the Brazilian Amazon, and their voices actually, there's absolutely no framing, no narratives in between narratives. And it really acts as a collection of stories representing different perspectives of women that would not be exposed, would have not been exposed through most of the mainstream media. So that's just a sort of like something that I think everyone can associate with as a story, like story putting a spotlight on the different voices. But as I said, story can act as a glue. And one can utilize the power of hashtags, for example, as a way to connect with other people sharing the same experiences. And this one is actually coming from the forestry sector, so the sector I guess I am in. And it is really male-oriented, quite male-oriented. So when you, for example, do a Google search, putting the keyword like foresters, you end up seeing photos with like male lumberjack kind of people, working in the forest as a search result. But the reality is that there are also people like female foresters who are also guarding and managing our forests, right? So the Chartered Foresters, Institute of Chartered Foresters in the UK mobilized the hashtag and then came up with the I Look Like a Forester on the International Women's Day. And this really acted as sort of as a magnet to connect those women who felt kind of left behind or left alone on their island. And that really sparked different kind of actions to people to share different photos and yeah, really talk and engage with each other. So the story can also act as a glue. And story can connect people as glue. It can also act as a web. And this is an example from Ghana. And Ghana actually made a very strong commitment to stop illegal logging. And the government, civil society, private sector have the same mission, but with different reasons, interest behind that commitment. And the Ghanaian government recognized that there is no single language, no narrative that works for all those communities, all those stakeholders. So they put in place a communication framework where each stakeholder group can tell the story in their own way. And by telling their individual stories from the different perspectives, the framework facilitated their commitment more effectively. But it doesn't mean that everything will work out instantaneously when there is a communication framework like this set in place. It takes time and efforts to identify the different actors, narratives, and languages in order to build a common understanding to ensure this framework actually functions well. So this worked in Ghana because there was a long history of dialogues and efforts to stop illegal logging and foster good governance, where all these efforts were implemented over the years. This one is really beautiful, and I always use this as an example. It's coming from Our Climate Voices, and it has basically hit all the boxes of story as a light glue and web. It's developed, so it's a, I think, NGO, and they developed a listening series called Climate Justice and Queer and Trans Liberation. What this initiative does is to connect us with the queer and trans climate justice organizers in different parts of the world to share how climate justice and LGBTQ issues intersect and put the spotlight on a number of systemic issues, such as community experiences, like homelessness or lack of resources and support. Yeah, what is really great about this example, and I think this is something, even you don't have any kind of equipment, any kind of resources, you can actually implement this kind of work to not only share this sort of like the conversation using Spotify and so on, but you can actually mobilize different kind of conversation around it. And they came up with a tool that you can actually use as a way to talk about the queer and trans issues with the immediate community that you're living with. So it's a really nice example just to portray that I know that there's online, sort of debates happening, and there's a lot of different kind of things going on, but you can also do grassroots level change by having this kind of conversation, initiating actions at the grassroots level. And I am telling this story as a story as framework from Ella, because with my own experience and moving away, so I worked in the journalism for a long time, and I moved away from this traditional way of telling story and narrative, really helped me to be part of the change making. So yeah, like I worked in this journalism organization called the European Journalism Center, where I planted sort of like a seed for new movement to improve fact checking and verification using digital techniques in newsroom. So that was back in 2011, long time ago, when the big earthquake happened in Japan. I witnessed a lot of different, rumors and verified facts circulating online, but the media were not really prepared to debunk them real time. And the same issue actually followed during the Hurricane Sandy and Boston bombings and so many other events. So I've reached out to journalists and experts who are actually already busy in this field, doing this sort of like verification work, research work. And they were really excited when I asked them like, hey, maybe we should just come up with like a guide that helps the newsroom to be able to deal with this kind of like fake information, or to be able to verify real time. And they got really, really excited, and all of them actually got on board. And this was really the first step. Like if you look at the sort of journalism industry, is really small, and this was really like the sort of the first moment to develop a global movement in the journalism industry to take verification and digital fact checking seriously. And today the practice almost became a standard in the sector. I'm not going to argue if it's really a good practice, like, each and every newsroom's actually doing right or wrong, because there are different kind of standards, but at least this became such an important thing in the journalism industry. So why did this work out? It is because we had the same concern. When there is a shared feeling that can really act as a driver for change, and you actually don't really even need an articulated, beautiful story, you can actually, connect with people and then just transform that change by not even articulating that sort of the, coming up as like a beautiful narrative. And that was really a learning point for me. And another example, which, just because, the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, and we are also collaborating on this. Our director at EFI is actually onto the even bigger change making at the moment. We recently published this 10 action plan for circular bioeconomy of well-being with 29 authors from organizations like Climate Kick, FAO, Harvard University, and so on. And this was really a collaborative effort to develop a common language and set the goals together to drive that change of, transitioning to the circular economy and, investing more in the nature. And what is really unique about this coalition was that our director, Mark, have been discussing the need to make the global movement with Prince Charles, who are heavily invested in the other issues related to forests. So this is really like it's a nice example that those kind of influencers, people who are already in power or with the brand, if you get them on board, you can actually multiply the impacts of for the change that you want to make. So this really leads to sort of the reflection that I wanted to do with you. And I'm not sure, this second part was quite sort of like maybe, kind of out of the context, but I wanted to share this with you because we can't forget about the humanness that we have in narrative making. And, like when we talk about the sort of making a change in the mental model, it's not about how great your, digital media strategy is about. It's about your role as someone who can actually connect those dots and, communicate and then actually engage with people at the emotional level. And I think that's really the sort of the hint that I get from the social change, social impact sector. And also my own experience was really that. So I wanted to kind of like, I know it was like really like, the digital media analysis, and then we went really explosively about this, but also I think we have to kind of come back to our own reality and humanness and the emotion that we have as a starting point. Think about the change that we want to have, and then articulate, mobilize the power you have as someone who can develop that narrative and stories, whatever that is, and then use that as your weapon to drive that change. So I hope it was maybe a little bit all over the place, but I hope that gave you a little bit of sort of new ideas, new insights. Yeah, and then if you like to share some of your thoughts, in relation to what role you can play, and then yeah, that'll be really good to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rina. That was awesome. Yeah, I certainly learned a lot. So would love to open the space. Feel free to turn your videos on and your mics on, and we'll use the last 15 minutes here to just have a discussion. I know I'll review in the chat sort of some of the intentions that you all had in coming in today and see if we can address some of those. I wanted to just, Andres, in the beginning, you had said, worried about the difficulty of explaining concepts of the well-being economy to people outside of the movement. And when Rina, you were describing the web, I really saw WEAll's sort of theory of change being articulated there, of providing basic language to then influence the different structures. And yeah, I mean, it's not universally understood language, right? You have to provide, we have like WEAll needs that are 5 values that sort of underpin what we think to be the well-being economy. And the point there is that you have these 5 values that can be undertaken by other people and transformed into narratives that work, all across the world. But I'm going to stop talking. Catherine, I see you've turned your video on, so please, if you want to
say anything, just so that you could see another person's face and know that we're here and listening. Thank you so much, Rina and Isabel.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so I would love to open the floor, for anybody, please. Any questions? And also I'd take any questions about WEAll in general, or WEAll citizens.
I don't necessarily have a question as such, but I was quite struck at how almost random the social media platforms are because of the algorithms. And I had, prior to this, felt there was a much more concentrated effort, and getting your story could really start to shift things. But it was very diverse, the groups that actually got engaged. They were taking it much more into their own context. So that was a total turnaround in my thinking about social media strategies and narratives. And I found it really interesting that you then brought it back to who we are as individuals, how we connect to our own narratives powerfully and are influencing perhaps within our spheres more, as and that's actually, that's something that I see in my work. I use this word intimate, and I just mean as in what you're close to and what you know. And I think there's the more close you are to the connections and the relations, and that tied in with what you're saying about the light and the glue and the web. I think that's where you start to find the narrative, and the narrative can shift and evolve as you are in different contexts. And also it shifts and evolves because you're growing and the context changing all the time as well. But thank you, that was really enlightening and fascinating.
Thank you so much. Yeah, no, I really feel that, when you sort of like in looking at the system thinking here and the sort of the laws of the system, and when you push hard, the system pushes you back. And I really feel that that's kind of like what the social media is becoming. that, you know, we want to try to influence some, you know, the debates and so on. But it's so massive and it's changing all the time. And the platforms actually have such a big role to play in, you know, controlling, manipulating information access. And as you said, Jackie, I really feel that we can only go back to the roots if you want to change something. And I really feel that, you know, Greta Thunberg really showed that as an example, that it's better to really focus on our immediate surrounding, and then everything else may, you know, come. I mean, for her, all the global movements came through as a sort of the, you know, secondary thing. She really focused on the something that she can do here at this, you know, moment in time. And that really feels like, you know, that's kind of the learning I got from the digital media analysis. We can try to come up with a strategy. We talked about it a little bit in the session as well. But in the end, if you really want to change something, it's up to, you know, it's really about the people and the connection and the conversation you have with those people. And that's so powerful. Like, it's so powerful that the digital media at the end, you know, if it becomes such a big movement, those kind of tech platforms can't even influence anymore. So I think that's kind of the sort of the learning for me from doing this digital method analysis, is that, yeah, we have to come back, you know, go back to the roots.
I just want to echo that same, you know, thank you. And I thought this was very fascinating, and that I've definitely learned a lot, and had a lot of the same insights and surprises that that other people have echoed. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you so much.
One thing I wanted, oh yeah, no, Rashimi, I see you are turning your video on. Would you like to speak?
Yeah, sorry, I seem to have a light on top of my head. And I don't know if my internet's stable, but hi. So I'm Rashmi. I'm here on a pretty large NGO that does this type of narrative a lot, and has been, you know, looking at how do we really connect with people at a much more personal level for a while. I think the challenge that we've got is that, you know, that you know, the Climate Voices example that you gave, Rina, was good. That's, you know, that's exactly the sort of thing that we try and do. But it does take more time, and it does mean that you're trying to talk to people in very specific types of media, which are like us. You know, people who are going to read stories about individuals and people from the LGBTIQ community, for example, are going to be people like us. I think one of the challenges we do have with this concept and model is, how do we popularize that to people not like us? And unfortunately, social media, digital media is where a lot of those people rest. And so the way that we often try and do it for my organization is to try and find those external hooks, or try and find those, or create those external hooks, big headline or big something, to draw people in, and then take them on that sort of more personal story. But it is also, you know, it's still a struggle to reach people and popularize that to an extent that people really sort of, it's a challenge where we've got at the moment, and the challenge of trying to do that in the context that we are at the moment, and I think COVID is an opportunity as well as a threat, but it is an opportunity for people to understand in their day-to-day how how an alternative economy might actually be a positive route, rather than going back to where we were pre-COVID, for example. I do think there's work we need to still do in understanding how do you really sort of reach out to people not like us at all.
Thank you. Yeah, Rina, I'm gonna your internet was a little bit spotty, but from my understanding, just to repeat for other people of talking about trying to get audiences that are not like the first movers. How do you get people that might not be in your sphere? And then also mentioning using like a hook of a big event, like for instance, COVID is a big event, while like when we're talking about economic systems change, hello, that's like the perfect kind of shoe in, though it's a terrible situation, right? So yeah, that just to rephrase, I think, or summarize.
Yeah,
And
no,
Rina, yeah.
I thought like what Lakshmi, right, said was really important, that you also work with the external or the actors, because they actually can speak that language that you can speak. Like I feel that with like I worked a lot with media and like policymakers, but not necessarily scientists, and I always have problem addressing them. And working together with people who actually can articulate that in that language that they speak becomes such a powerful tool. And yeah, I really thought that was really, really great comment as a way to move forward. Yeah, also another thing is that COVID is of course everyone's shared experience, and that makes it really strong because everyone has different kind of concerns, but at least the shared experience is there. And as a way to move forward, it's a different sort of, yeah, I really like this like story as a web approach, that we can maybe try to make that sort of like a network of people, and then the different kind of communities who are also engaging with their own community and so on. And I really feel like Wellbeing Economy Alliance is doing that. Like I find it really fascinating that you have mobilized so many different actors, so many different conversation with so many different stakeholders, and including citizens. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to how you guys take forward from here, and yeah, especially in the time of COVID. Thank you so much, Lakshmi, by the way, for the comment.
I'm just unmuting really quickly. I know that we're coming to the end of the session, but I was actually wondering, Rina and Isabel, and anyone, if you could forward on more examples of initiatives using the story as web, or initiatives using the story as all three. I think that was really powerful to see, and each one is really relevant to what we're trying to do, but particularly the web, and what Rashmi was saying that was also really resonating with me in the conversations that we're having internally. So I would love to dig deeper into that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I already have several things that I can also immediately share with you. Like after the call, maybe I can also send it over to Isabel, and you guys can take a look. But there is also a nice review. So it's actually, this framework was published on the Stanford, I think it was like Social Science or Business Review. So I will also make sure to share that link with you so you can take a look and then, get deeper into the framework. Thank you. Thank you so much, Kathleen.
Yeah, so in the last 4 minutes, I'm going to just do a couple of plugs for upcoming events. So we're going to have another event run by Jackie here, and that's going to be in November. And that's going to be talking about internal narratives. So sort of as a kind of great transition from our discussion today.
I just want to say thank you to Rina for that transition. It was kind of perfect and unexpected.
Yeah. And then we'll do one in December. Myself and another woman, Mariana, will do a presentation on moving from what we learned today, from the internal to then action, to kind of bring about some of this stuff. And I'll share some experiences and examples that WEAll is trying to do, and hopefully get some input from you all, because I think we certainly don't have the answers, and if we did, then we'd be living in a well-being economy, but we are trying. And just to make sure, yeah, so when I share these resources, I will share them on the Citizens platform, which is weallcitizens.org, and if you all don't have an account, please set one up. I will also share on our socials. And I will have this recording shared on YouTube, and I will also attach the resources on YouTube. So just to tell you where you can learn more and moving forward from today. I am always looking for other people to contribute to WEAll Citizens, whether or not you want to host an event, whether or not you want to share some of your work. We have like Zoom links that we can share that are available. I mean, I think we're trying to kind of cultivate a community of actors and doers and sharing experiences. And, you know, it doesn't matter if you are yourself in a small nonprofit to a big organization. Like we really think there's a lot to be shared amongst just anyone that's interested in this kind of work. So my email is isabel@weall.org. Please feel free to reach out. I'd love to have any feedback about the sessions always. So thank you again, Rina. That was fantastic. I really appreciate your time today. And yeah, thank you all for being here as well. And we look forward to future sessions and collaborations.
Thank you very much, everyone. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to Jackie's session. I'll make sure to join. Thank you so much, all.
Thank you, Rina.